I think it is. Is it? Okay.
Next week?
Yeah, do you want to check? Okay. Okay, so I was just saying Wednesday, we will have no Wednesday night service here because Corinne has asked that we have the service at Uncle Bert's house. So that's where we're going to have, they wanted to do some prayers and hymns on Wednesday, okay? Okay, so today's sermon is, what is the importance of the Sabbath? The meaning of the Sabbath is the seventh day of the week, divinely set apart for rest and worship. Rest from freedom, from activity or labor, peace of mind or spirit to take relief. In Genesis 2, we read, "And on the seventh day God ended his work which he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had done. Then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work which God had created and made." We live in a world where it seems there is always something to do and no time to rest. Yet God demonstrated that rest is appropriate and good. If God himself rested from his work, we should not be surprised that we also need rest. God didn't rest because he was tired. He rested because he just wanted to sit back and just admire his creation. Jesus demonstrated this principle when he and his disciples left in a boat to get away from the crowds. That God blessed the seventh day means that he set it apart for holy use. In Exodus 20:8-11, we read, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work. You, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath and hallowed it." The Sabbath was a day set aside for rest and worship. It was a commandment in the time of Moses, not a suggestion. If you remember when there was one man was caught picking up sticks on the Sabbath day, and some of his fellow people just saw him doing it and reported it to Moses and Aaron. At that time, the law was just given. So even Moses did not know what the consequences would be. So he had to ask. He says, well, they had to confine the man, and then they went and they asked God what should be done to him. And even though it seems harsh at the time, because God wanted him to be stoned to death. You got to remember, at that time, that was when the Ten Commandments were given, and the fourth commandment was to keep the Sabbath. So God had to be, he had to keep up with what he said. That's why, it was a matter of obedience. You were breaking God's law on that day, and that's why he had to be stoned. Even though it seems harsh at the time, this was the beginning of creation, like we're talking about. So he had to keep it up, even though it might seem harsh to us at this time. But we need to spend time with God, to cultivate a relationship, to thank him for provision and protection for the last week. God himself provided this day for us to rest and refresh our minds and spirit. In Mark 2:27, we read, "And he said unto them, The Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. Therefore the Son of Man is Lord also of the Sabbath." God created the Sabbath for our benefit. We are restored both physically and spiritually when we take time to rest and focus on God. But the Pharisees had made the Sabbath more important than the actual Sabbath rest. The rules and regulations that they restricted on the people were just so harsh. When confronted with rules of your own or others, we need to ask ourselves, does this rule have biblical roots that can be supported in the context of the scripture? Because God rested on the seventh day, he designated it a day holy, a day to be remembered for all time. That's not to say if you got something, like your child got hurt and you got to take them to the hospital or whatever, like you can't miss a Sunday, or, like we just got to, you got to see what is the more important. Like God is not going to condemn you for missing church on a Sunday, or for some other more important things. You have to know what is right and what is wrong. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. He says in the fourth commandment, 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord's rest. On the seventh day, God ended his work which he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had done. Then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work which God had created and made. Because God rested on the seventh day, he designated it as a holy day to be remembered for all time. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. God designed the Sabbath day for two main reasons: to commemorate the creation as a sign of and also as a sign of our salvation. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, but he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. In Exodus 20:11, "And I give them my statutes and show them my judgments, which if a man do, he shall even live by them." It is important in that it makes a statement about the origin of the Sabbath and offers a reason for us to observe this day, namely because God his creative activity. He created the earth and life on it and instituted the Sabbath right in the beginning. Verse 11 discusses what the Lord was doing during the creation week. 4 areas are mentioned: heaven, earth, sea, and all that is in them. However, with regard to the seventh day, 3 activities of God are stressed. He rested, he blessed the Sabbath day, and made it holy. And they are found in the same order in Genesis as in Exodus. In Ezekiel we read, "I give them my Sabbaths as a sign between us, so that they would know that I, the Lord, made them holy." In verse 13, "But the house of Israel rebelled against me in the wilderness. They walked not in my statutes, and they despised my judgments, which if a man do, he shall even live in them, and my Sabbaths they greatly polluted. Then I said, I would pour out my fury upon them in the wilderness to consume them." The Sabbath instituted by God at creation was entrusted to Israel as a sign that God created and redeemed them. The Hebrew word for Sabbath literally means to cease. Just as God rested from his creation work, we are to rest from our day-to-day occupation and refocus on what's really important. As we see, we can do and work and work and work all day, but when God calls you home, whether you like it or not, all the things that you had on your to-do list, it's going to be left behind. And we have to remember one day He is going to call each one of us home. And what we do here on earth for eternity is what's going to last, not what is done for ourselves or building up our own kingdom. The Sabbath is a day to push the reset button. Taking a Sabbath rest is an act of faith. It's a reminder that no matter what we do, that God is still in control. When we cease from pursuing our material goals for one day each week, we are saying to God, God, I trust you to maintain control while I spend this day focusing on you. I trust you to provide for my needs 7 days a week, even if I only work for 6 days of them. Regardless of how much money I could earn today or how much remains on my to-do list from last week, I am going to rest my mind and my body and bask in your presence. Geez, that woodpecker loved to come on Sundays. But we need faith to do this. We really do need faith to stop, even though we got so much to get done. We have to trust God that He is in control and that He will work things out. I mean, I'm not saying it's like a commandment like how when the guy got stoned to death. There are times when a Sunday, there is something you just got to do. And God, Jesus in the New Testament was not like in the Old Testament. You know, he understands, as we will come to that later. God knew that in our human tendency to further our own interests, we would need opportunities for spiritual growth, to refocus on things of eternal importance. Let's face it, during the week, most of us do not have that time to give. You know, like, because by the time you get up and you go to work and you come home, you're tired. You know, like you can't even keep your eyes open to read the Psalms even. So like that's why he's saying, like we realize you got 6 days in which you gotta try and accomplish all that you can. But if at all possible, take the 7th day for your body to rest, for your mind to rest, and focus on me, who can restore and who can provide for you. The Sabbath is an opportunity to break away from the pressures of everyday living. And, you know, like, because God blessed and hallowed that 7th day. Both Genesis and Exodus says that God blessed and hallowed the rest day. What does it mean for God to bless a day? I think it means that He makes that day a time of blessing. When God blesses a man, that man becomes rich with blessings. When God blesses a land, the land becomes rich with blessings. So when He blesses a day, that day also becomes rich with blessings. So like how does it fit together? God made it a source of blessing and He made it to focus on Himself. This day is to be focused on God. When you hallow God and focus your attention on Him, you receive more blessings than if you keep busy on this day. 7 days a week you are busy with secular affairs, thinking that professional advancement and money are the route to true happiness. As we see, money does not bring you true happiness. You can have all the money in the world, but you need to focus on God for that inner peace. The reason given in both Genesis 2 and 3 and Exodus 20 and 11, why God blessed and hallowed the 7th day, is that on it God rested from all His work which He had done in creation. It means at least that He was satisfied that His work of creation was complete and was very good. His rest means that He wanted to now stand back as if it were in leisure, and savor the beauty and completeness of his creative work. It's like when you finish a project and you just stand back and you look and says, wow, this turned out really good. That's what he's saying about us. He created us. He's saying his people were good. He saw us as good. This is the real basis of hallowing and blessing the day of rest. He is saying, in effect, let my highest creature, the one in my image, stop every seventh day and commemorate with me the fact that I am the Creator who has done all this. He's just asking us, take that one day. And he's not asking you to take the whole day, you know, but like you said, you who've taken the time to just come and just be reminded of his goodness and his mercies towards us. Let one day out of 7 demonstrate that all land and all animals and all raw materials and all breath and strength and thought and emotion and everything comes from God. Let man look to me in leisure one day out of 7 for the blessing that is so elusive in the affairs of every day that we have to do. The beautiful thing about the Sabbath is that God instituted it as a weekly reminder of 2 things. One is that all true blessing comes from his grace and not our labor. The other is that we hallow him and honor him and keep the day holy if we seek the fullness of his blessings by giving our special attention to him on that day. It would be a mistake to conclude that from these 2 texts that the only blessings we would focus on during our Sabbath day were the blessings of creation. And, you know, in Deuteronomy 5, it gives us a second version of the 10 Commandments. Here, the basis on the Sabbath day observance is very different. It says, you shall remember that you were a servant in the land of Egypt. He's speaking to the Israelites. And the Lord your God brought you out thence with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. In other words, the mighty hand and the outstretched arm of God were not wearied by the work of creation. God's arm is still full of strength. God's rest was not for recuperation, as I said before, but is for exaltation. Now the same God has shown his power not just to create, he's showing us he's got the power to save us. So the focus on the Sabbath is on God, not only the source of creation, but like I said, for salvation. Your God brought you out of the land of Egypt. Therefore, he commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. One day of rest in every 7, kept holy to the Lord, reminds us and shows the world that God is our creator and our deliverer. We did not make ourselves. We cannot sustain or save ourselves without his grace. In other words, as the scripture says, be still and know that he is God. What did the Lord say at the Exodus from Egypt? He says, fear not, stand firm, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you will only have to be still. We can take that for us too. When we're going through the battles of life, the trials, we just need to stand still, rest in his grace, and see that he will come through. We can't fight all our battles by ourselves. He is going before us. He knows